so much, Joy. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming today to this wonderful talk on a book that Claudia Christen-Schneider has just published last month called Trauma-Informed Restorative Dialogues, the community of the power of community rather than the community of power. But I mean, we could debate that, I guess. So just before we kick off, just want to run through a couple of things just to note that the session is being recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, please do keep your camera off. If you raise your hand via audio and video, you will be recorded. And if you don't want that to happen, just bear that in mind. You can just write a question in the chat. We will pick it up. Joy will be monitoring that. So do ask questions in that way. If you took advantage today of joining us with the free ticket option, but you can contribute to the Mint House, they're a great charity, do really great work, playing a central role in restorative justice awareness raising and training across England and Wales. So please do contribute to them if you can. And also just to note that the Mint House don't keep your email addresses. So if you want to stay on their mailing list and be aware of events they're running and training and a range of different things, do sign up to their newsletter so that you can get information first time like everybody else. So, as I said, I'm Kerry Clamp. For those of you who don't know me, and I'm sure many of you don't, I'm an associate professor of criminology at the University of Nottingham. I am an academic who has a very strong interest in practice, and I was the editor of the newsletter for the European Forum for Restorative Justice for 11 years, and I was the chair of the Board of Trustees for the Restorative Justice Council from 2018 to 2021. So I have a large international network, and part of I guess my own intellectual project as an academic is realizing a lot of the time, and this will not be news to anybody who works in the restorative space, but practice really leads everything, right? Practice is at the forefront. Academics are a bit slower catching up, and we often base a lot of our work on what practitioners are doing, develop theories from that, test things out, encourage pilot projects, the rest of things. So I really wanted to create a space for practitioners to publish. So because I'm an academic and I have a relationship with Routledge, I publish with them, well, frequently. I spoke to my publisher, Tom, some years ago and said, hey, what about if we had pracademics, right? Practitioners who were involved in research as well, who had a really strong, I guess, foundation for their practice, and we could give them a space where we could learn from them rather than from academics. So this is a new venture for Routledge. The series is called Contemporary Issues and Debates in Restorative Practice. And it really is about trying to understand what is happening in the field of practice around the world, and that kind of from the mouths of the experts, being able to talk about how their practice has evolved on the basis of theory, or actually how their practice might be challenging what we understand about restorative justice, restorative practice, etc. And so Claudia's book is the second in the series. I got my copy yesterday, which is really exciting. And I have to tell you something. Routledge academic books are really expensive, and I'm sure that won't be a surprise to anybody, but we print these for around £30, and there are sales, so you can sometimes pick up these books for about £23, which is affordable, I think, particularly when it's an academic text. So that is where we are. I came across Claudia. Geez, it must be Claudia. I think like it must be 2009, maybe somewhere around there, 2008, 2009.
No, 2017.
Oh, no, it was before then. It was before then. I was
not in the RJ field before that.
That is impossible. Anyway, so some years ago, but part of the newsletter, because we would get contributions from people all over the world, it was really, really interesting. But Claudia, we had an article from her, and I was like, oh my God, this woman's writing is just so good. And I don't know about this practice, and it was just brilliant. And so when I got the series up and running, Claudia was one of the first people that I approached, because I thought, you know, she writes in a really accessible way. Her practice is really grounded and she thinks really deeply about things. And so I thought that the gift that I experienced, I wanted other people to experience. And so that's why I approached this. So I'm so proud of all the hard work and the challenges of writing over an extended period. It's hard, right? But you've got it. You've done it. I'm so proud of you. So I'm going to hand over to Claudia now and let her talk about her wonderful work. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Carrie, as well, for your warm welcome, and a welcome to each one of you. I'm really happy that so many people are here. It's unexpected for me, so it makes me nervous as well. And yes, I'd be happy to share with you more about the book. I hope it works with the presentation. I just need to make sure. So yes, I think you should be able to see it. So yes, it's been a long process. Carrie mentioned when we got to know each other. Actually, I entered the field of restorative justice in 2012 when we were still living in Chile. I am a criminologist, and for many years I worked in Chilean prisons. And so part of my story is in the book as well. And I'd like to share with you a bit what the book is about, what restorative dialogues are. I think many of you may not have heard this term before. Why we chose to work with restorative dialogues, and why we then went on to develop a trauma-informed approach to this. And I will also explain what trauma-informed practice is and the need to work trauma-informed with staff and volunteers. So the book really introduces this approach that may not be as well known as many other restorative approaches. So restorative dialogues are about dialogues in groups, where groups of victims and offenders that are not related meet. And the idea was to make an approach to restorative justice that's often not as visible or well known, more visible, better understood, because it is an approach that's being used all around the world. So in my book, I'm speaking about some programs that are in place in Europe, and I try to introduce different kinds of programs but that are based on the same principle. And I know that there are many more programs like this out there. So there may be many of you who are present here who work in the same kind of approach. And please don't feel that you were not taken into account. My idea really was to just highlight some of the possibilities of how it can be put into practice. So it provides first-hand perspectives on the impact and challenges of implementing restorative dialogues. It's based on interviews with victims from 5 different European countries, facilitators from these same countries. Then we have lots of feedbacks from anonymous evaluation forums from offenders as well, but who took part in the Swiss program. All the other interviews, they were with interviewees from other programs as well. It explains how our program has evolved, how we took into account as well all the evaluations we got, the discussions we had as well with victims and facilitators. And it then outlines what a trauma-informed practice is, how it relates to restorative justice, and then as well how we learn that it is important as well not only to be trauma-informed with our participants or clients, but as well with our facilitators. So what are restorative dialogues? Restorative dialogues, as I said, is about group dialogues being held between a small group of unrelated victims and offenders. So there is no link between them. What connects them is that they have either experienced or committed the same type of crimes. So they speak more or less about the same kind of act. And I really like Patricia Romney's explanation about what dialogue is. She says that dialogue is focused conversation engaged in intentionally with the goal of increasing understanding, addressing problems, questioning thoughts or actions. It engages the heart as well as the mind. It is different from ordinary everyday conversation in that dialogue has a focus and a purpose. And this is really what it is about when these groups meet. It's not a conversation that is just like a debate or confrontation, but it's really getting deep into a dialogue And you can really feel how hearts and minds are engaged in this. So the aim is to focus on addressing the harm and consequences of crime in the lives of those present, so all of the participants, be it from the perspective of having suffered from a crime or having committed one, but then as well to see that there are so many overlaps, so really delving into deep conversations, promote empathy and understanding between participating victims and offenders. And as they share their stories, you see again how often both sides have so many experiences that overlap. So it's as well an understanding of trying to see the other perspective, trying to see how someone can get to the point, for example, where they do commit a crime and why this may happen. It's not about like justifying it, but really discussing it to get to an understanding. It encourages deep exploration of their thoughts and actions, gaining insight and understanding into their perspectives and experiences. So in all of the programs that I looked at, and as well the other programs I know outside of Europe, usually participants are being prepared for participation individually. So in our program, for example, we have an information event for offenders. We mainly work in prisons. So in our case, it's prison dialogues, while other programs, they do it outside of prison. But so we have an info event for the prisoners. Then we have individual interviews where we check as well their motivation, but as well their fear, their questions, all that may come up. And we really try to prepare them well to then work with the group. And then we have as well a group preparation with the group of prisoners that has been selected. On the other hand, we have the individual preparation of victims, and this may take more or less time depending on where they're at as well in their trauma recovery and as well the support they get otherwise outside. And we also try that victims have a chance to meet at least a moment before we start with the program, so they get to know each other and the facilitators. In our case, groups meet 8 times for 2 hours. I know in France and Belgium, for example, it's 5 times 3 hours. The amount of time usually is more or less the same. This may as well differ a bit depending on the program. But at the heart of the process really lies the sharing of their stories, the narrative approach. As I explained in the book, in comparison to other programs where they jump into the stories immediately, we really try first to set the safe space to make certain that participants get to know each other, that they really can as well start to create this safe community, this safe space where they get to know each other and as well trust each other, where empathy can grow as well before they start sharing with their stories, because we know that once we enter into that narrative part, it's really something that gets to them on a deep level and where they need to feel safe in order to really be able to open up. The groups are formed according to the type of crimes, and that has been what I heard from all of the programs that I know. So either we have, for example, groups that concentrate on violence, which may be homicide cases. We have lots of hostage takings as well, physical violence, this kind of crimes. There are specialized groups for sexual violence, domestic violence, as well for political violence. So the aim really is that the groups, they know and understand what the other is talking about. Participants can receive as well additional support from facilitators. So we always check what kind of support might, for example, the participating victims need. For us, it's as well important to see, depending on where they stand in their recovery process, whether any therapists, be it psychologists or psychiatrists are involved, or if not, as well make connections. We also offer debriefings between the meetings, for example, the same as well for the prisoners. So it's really important that they feel supported through this. So why did we choose this approach that is not as well known as, for example, direct victim offender dialogues? The Council of Europe recommendation says that restorative justice should be available for everyone, for every person who's interested in a process like this at all times, be it before a criminal justice process, during, after, outside, whatever. So it really should be a service that's there as well for all types of crimes, no matter where the people live. But what if a direct encounter is not possible, or it is not safe, or it may not be beneficial for many reasons? We have cases, for example, where be it victims or offenders approach us and they might like to get into a conversation, a dialogue with the other party, but they may not even know who this other person is, or the person has passed away, or they don't know anymore where they live. Often as well, we have international cases where a victim may live in one place and the person who has caused the harm in another. Or as well, we had cases where the victim, for example, wanted to enter into a dialogue, but we realized that the person who had caused the harm was so manipulative, was really not a person that would have been safe to enter into dialogue, that we had to say, you know, we don't think it might be in the best, but it might be beneficial for you. So the aim is really that as well in these cases where it's not possible for one side or the other, that we can widen access to restorative justice, that we can as well offer a restorative process where a direct dialogue may not be possible. What we realized as well, and it's something that we come to see more and more, is the importance of experiencing a sense of community and belonging, and the healing and transformative power that lies in these connections formed. And that's for the ones who take part as victims and for the ones who take part as the ones who have caused harm, but to really enter into relationship, to exchange on a deep level, to really see the human in the other person and the support. And in interviews, I had so many of the crime victims, they feel alone or even abandoned by their community of care. They don't feel understood or supported, or sometimes they feel they're even being re-traumatized by their community, or they say, you know, so many years have passed, you really need to turn the page. It wasn't that bad. You have to go on. And they feel they can't. So often there's a lot of shame as well, and they can't even share about it anymore because it's just too much, or they feel to be a burden for their loved ones. So they really appreciate the safe and healing space in the group, and the mutual support. And the more the group grows together, the less you can feel like there are two groups. It's just one group of human beings coming together, supporting each other. And one of the interesting things is that many of the victims say, you know, in the beginning, we didn't think that the other group, like the offenders, would be as important for our healing process. But in the end, it's them who really showed us their empathy, their support. That was what brought us healing. So victims say that they participate because they want to hear why offenders do what they do and really have a discussion with them to heal more. But as well, what they get out of it is that feeling of I'm not alone in the world. There are others who feel the same way. There may be other victims who as well, even 20, 30 years after, they'll suffer from traumatic symptoms, and it's normal. I'm not crazy, as everyone wants to make me believe. So it provides as well a space of remembrance, healing, and closure. And many of them, we had so many victims of serious crimes who said, you know, it's the first time that I could really share my entire story and to really just lay it out and feel I'm in the right space. I'm in a space where I can share, where I'm understood as well. And now I can talk about it as well with others. For offenders, we hear that it's like a form of therapy, that they are deeply moved by the testimonies of the victims. They also see it as a space of dignity and truthful speech. So they usually say, or always, you have never ever had any other comment, that they really feel accepted as well. It changes the way they think about victims. They see them as human beings, not just the ones who file a complaint or want to see them in prison. They start seeing things from a different angle, and it really helps them as well to take the decision to really work in their lives and to go on. And facilitators say as well, what they feel is that it is this form of community, this sense of belonging, of feeling safe, that's really so important for both sides. And they said, we're able to move forward because we're recognized and we recognize each other in our respective stories. So that storytelling part, that narrative approach really is so important for both sides. Get out of the narrow and restrictive vision, really see the other person. And the facilitator says, well, it's this mix of victims and offenders in a group that brings about unexpected and profound changes in perspectives. So why did we develop our program over time into a trauma-informed approach? One thing is that we really came to see how pervasive trauma is in today's society. It really can affect anyone. In individuals who have experienced interpersonal violence, we know that they are more likely to suffer from trauma-related symptoms. So that's the highest risk for developing as well post-traumatic symptoms. And the more groups we had as well, the more obviously direct offender victim dialogues we saw how widespread trauma is among this group. And we knew that if we really want a truly holistic approach, we must be trauma informed with everyone involved, our victims, offenders, the facilitators. For victims, it's that we really understand what trauma is, the impact it has on an individual's lives, how to create a safe space for them and minimize the risk of re-traumatization, as well to know how to work with feelings of self-blame and shame that are so present in the lives of so many victims and that again increase trauma-related symptoms. But as well to understand, what it might be for a person who still may suffer from trauma symptoms to get, for example, into a prison or even into a group, what it might cause as well in them, what triggers there might be, and how can we recognize if someone's triggered, how can we respond to this in a really safe way. But as well, the more stories we heard, it became clear that we cannot make a distinction between victims and offenders. And I'm using here these terms not to put labels on people, just to make it easy to understand about whom I'm speaking now. But it's not what we do in the group. We see the human being. And research shows that many individuals who commit serious crimes have also been victims of serious crimes, be it abuse of any form during their childhood or teenage years. And there are many studies who say up to 90% or even more of offenders of serious harm have been victims of serious harm. So if we expect them to develop empathy towards victims, we also must address their trauma and shame, what they have been through, and support them in their healing process. Only then are they able to really as well empathize with victims and really listen to them in a deep going way, and as well the way they express themselves starts to change. And we know that unresolved trauma and shame are major risk factors for offending behavior. Trauma really can affect anyone, and so we need a holistic approach. So what is a trauma-informed approach or trauma-informed practice? It's not therapy. When we work trauma-informed, that does not mean that all of us have to be therapists. It's a framework that acknowledges how widespread trauma is, but as well the impact of trauma on a person's neurobiological, biological, psychosocial, social development and well-being, on their relationships. So it's about realizing how widespread trauma is in general and the huge effect it can have on individuals. Recognize symptoms, and it's as well a changing of the way we think about it. So someone who suffers from trauma may have reactions that seem not irrational or exaggerated or whatever, and to really as well start thinking more in terms of what might this person have experienced and how can I be a safe person for them and support them in their path. So recognize symptoms, but as well respond to trauma in these people's lives, to respond as well in a way that we adapt our services so that they become safe for trauma survivors, resist re-traumatization, and really see how crucial relationships are for people who have experienced trauma. It can totally shatter their worldview, their interactions. Especially, as I said, interpersonal violence is known to create the highest risk for trauma symptoms. So it's as well mainly about creating safe relationships where they can even enter a trustful relationship again. It prioritizes trauma-sensitive service delivery. It's about collaborating with our clients, do things with them, to empower them, give them a voice, and, as I said, to prevent re-traumatization. So there are 6 trauma-informed principles that are very important. And I often say these 6 principles, it's more or less to counter the effects of traumatization, to counter the feelings created by trauma. Someone who has experienced trauma, and as well, especially interpersonal trauma, they lack the sense of safety. I have been attacked. I have been harmed by another human being. So there's this huge sense of the world is not a safe place anymore. People are not safe. Or as well, it really shatters trust in other people. So they may really struggle to have even the courage to enter relationships again, or to trust another person again, to open up. So it's about creating safe and trusting relationships where they can start opening up again. As well, when a traumatic event happens, I have no choice. I have no say in it. Something is happening with me that I don't want to happen, but that I can't control it. So it's giving back as much choice as possible, as much control as possible. And as I said, it's not only with the ones we would deem as the victims, it is as well when we're working with offenders and prisoners. And there are sometimes we think it's so difficult, but even in a prison setting, there are many little choices we can give back to them, give them back control. It's about collaborating with people and really not just do things for them, but do things with them to really show them, we believe that you are the experts of your lives. You know what you need. You know what's best for you. And for example, in restorative justice as well, when we have direct victim of the offender dialogues, that we create processes with them. They know what they need. They know what's best for them, to really empower people that they can do things on their own. And you may think, but how do you do this in a group? And I can tell you, even in a group, as I explain in the book, there are ways to empower as well individuals in the group, but as well empower the group in itself. And one aspect that often gets forgotten is the cultural humility. We're in such international community often when we work with these groups, and every culture has their own way to deal with trauma and its impact. And we may come from a totally different culture and we may think, oh, how strange they deal with it. But it's their way, and it's not better or worse. But to really have this like humbleness, this humility as well, to say, I don't know everything. I want to be open. I want to learn. And again, co-create something that makes sense for them. So how can we be trauma-informed in restorative justice? It's about understanding trauma, recognize different trauma responses in people, the impact it has on people's behavior. And for this, we do need specialized facilitator training to handle trauma effectively. We need to be flexible and have sensibility in our processes. So for each RJ process, it is possible to include these 6 principles. And in the book, obviously, I can go into detail what this can look like, but allow as much choice as possible to really put lots of emphasis on creating safe and trusting relationships, use trauma-sensitive language, shame-sensitive approach, collaborate as well with mental health and other support services, partner with them, learn from them, create networks so that we really can support people well. And one important point that really is something that we came to see more and more, and I am sorry to say that we really did not take this into consideration when we started, is to really care about facilitator well-being as well in a very specific way and work trauma-informed with them as well. RJ work is emotionally demanding. Our organization only works in cases of serious harm. And so you can imagine when you listen to stories every day, again and again, murder cases, lots of sexual violence, and this, it has an impact on us. And so one of the chapters that was not planned in the beginning, and I think, Carrie, it was your suggestion as well to include this in the end, is why we need to work trauma-informed as well with facilitators and what it means to create trauma-informed teams. And I couldn't find anything in restorative justice that really addresses this issue. But when talking to my colleagues here in Switzerland or as well abroad, I see the impact it has on people. I know it from my own life, how I can end up with nightmares. I'm thinking of murder cases, maybe even murder cases of young children, which we have had as well. It makes something with you. I'm a crime victim myself, so it may re-trigger things even decades after that you think, I'm past this. And if we look at studies that have been done in other fields, where some studies say that approximately 50% of helping professionals may experience secondary trauma at some point in their careers. Others, for example, when you look into victim services, it's even higher. So we cannot be truly trauma-informed in our services if we do not extend the approach to our teams. And it's not just about self-care. Organizations have a responsibility, even when we're volunteer organizations as we are. It's not just for the professionals. We need to be trauma-informed with everyone. And it doesn't have to be expensive. And so the chapter I dedicated to this, I really tried as well to come up with some tools. So I read through tons of material, seeing what's out there for other professions, trying to adapt it and make it really hopefully easy and in a way that, as I say, it doesn't have to be expensive. So on the left hand side you can see a tool that I have in the self-care part, which is in there as well, which can help individual facilitators to work through their own self-care plans. But then as well, an important part of the chapter is as well, what does it mean to create a trauma-informed team? And again, it's number one, cultivating supportive relationships, honest, authentic relationships. Create a trauma-informed environment. This means as well normalizing trauma. It can affect any one of us. And it can pop up out of nowhere. And for many, it may be embarrassing. Maybe if you have been in restorative justice for 20, 30 years and you think, I've seen it all, I can deal with it. There may suddenly be a case that triggers something. And so if we normalize it in our teams to really open this space, this door as well, we can speak about it and say, oh, I'm really suffering. It really affects me. Can you help me? And just share and be open with each other. Offer resources and training. Again, this doesn't have to be expensive. There's so many things out there. We can create folders where we can put things down that are accessible for everyone. We can maybe send one person to a training and ask them to come back and train our teams. We can reach out to other teams, to mental health services, ask them, can you please give us a 2-hour presentation or something on a specific topic? And so often they're ready to do this, and maybe you can something do for them. And the other thing is to really provide supportive leadership as well. So much is about leadership. And again, go down in the pyramid, it's about relationships. So couple of concluding words. Dialogue lies at the center of the book. It lies at the center of restorative dialogues. It lies at the center of a trauma-informed approach to relationships. It's really about genuine exchange, mutual understanding, empathy, deep listening, sharing experiences. And this is really where restoration recovery can take shape. The power of community. This is really something that hit us and that we experience again and again, how important it can be for individuals to really have the sense of belonging, to have this connection. That's what makes it effective as well, this approach. It leads to mutual support. And I can tell you, there are moments when we really have tears when, for example, one of the offender is sharing his story, maybe his traumatic story, and one of the victim gets up and just embraces this person. And these are moments that are so strong. So community really acts as a catalyst for healing and transformation on both sides. And I think it's as well this, to see the humanity in whoever is there, to blur these distinctions of I'm a victim, you're an offender, or the opposite, that really makes something as well in people's lives. The need for a trauma-informed approach, that's really something that goes through the book, right, like a red line. For victims, it means that we create emotional and psychological safe spaces, that we really enable them to fully participate, express themselves, even in the face of shame and self-blame. So we need to know how to deal with these things and to support them. For offenders, recognize the role of trauma in harmful behavior, to really foster meaningful accountability without excusing their actions, but as well about breaking these cycles of violence, to know that traumatic experiences, they really can cause more violence again. And as I said, for facilitators, it helps them to manage emotional intensity, but as well helps them to support their clients, but it can also prevent secondary trauma. Trauma-informed restorative justice. Restorative justice is not inherently trauma-informed. Facilitators must develop the necessary knowledge and skills to integrate trauma awareness into their practice. So what does the book offer? Some publicity towards the end. It's kind of a roadmap for implementing restorative dialogues in a trauma-informed way. It covers key lessons that we learned, hard lessons that we learned, the training we would say nowadays that is required, some best practice examples, not only from us, but as well from colleagues. Practical tools for facilitators, lots of real case studies, direct quotes from participants. And then there are always boxes in there with theoretical insight. This may be about the impact on shame, on victims or on offenders, how to work in a shame-sensitive way, the role of storytelling, and its role in recovery and resistance, how to integrate trauma-informed principles into any restorative justice process. So it's really full of tools, strategies as well for building trauma-informed teams. And in the end, there is an appendix that has an introduction to the neurobiology of trauma, explains the effect of trauma on brain and behavior. And for those who may be new to trauma and its impact, it might be best to actually start the book at the end, which we usually don't do with novels. You can do it with this book, as it may help as well to understand what the book is about. So if you're interested in the book, there is the link. You will get the PDF as well, and the QR code. Currently, it's even on offer. It's £7 cheaper than it usually is. So yeah, that's the information. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions you may have.
Great presentation. Thanks so much, Claudia. Feel free to put questions in the chat. If you don't want to ask, feel free to put your hand up if you'd like to dialogue with Claudia. We have one question that came through, Claudia, is about how do people hear about restorative dialogues? What is the kind of the referral process, you know, working with people and then eventually them saying, yes, this is something that I want to participate in? What are the kind of dynamics and processes, and I guess, you know, the kinds of challenges and opportunities related to that?
So on the victim side, we have victim services that closely collaborate with us, and they share information about restorative justice in general. And so they explain to victims as well that there is the possibility to enter into a direct victim-offender dialogue or a restorative conference or whatever they choose, or as well the groups. So often victims come to us through victim services, and they know that there are different options. But in terms of victims, it's really much more difficult to reach victims than the offenders, because we work in about 10 prisons by now. So for the ones who are in prison, they obviously hear about it through their social services and support services in general. And this makes it easier for them to hear about it. We're starting to extend as well to outside of prison. So for example, we have now as well services who work with offenders outside of prison, like these violence offices. I don't know how you call them here. I think they call it violence prevention offices. And so that's how they hear about it. But we have as well victims who hear from other victims, or they may have heard in the media.
Great, thank you so much. There's another question that has come up that other people have been wondering about as well, is do you work with juveniles?
Yes, we do. We have groups from 14 years of age up to, I think, 78 was the oldest participant we had. Obviously, we have them in different groups. So we started working even with very young minors, like between 14 and 17 last year. Before we had usually groups between 17 and 24 because they're in a different prison as well, depending on the crime they have committed and when. And then we have the adult groups. But yes, we did have to adapt the program for minors. So it's a lot more interactive, even more than the other program. And we often create small groups. So what we saw, what works best is, for example, we have 3 minors, 3 victims, 3 facilitators. So we have activities that we do in the entire group as well. Storytelling is always in the entire group, but then we as well divide them into smaller groups. So one facilitator, one victim, one offender, and then they really get into deep conversations as well.
Great, thank you. Liv has asked that you mentioned about the potential for manipulation or coercion being a preventative factor in terms of a victim and a perpetrator from a single incident engaging with one another. And she was just wondering what kind of manipulation or coercive, I guess, behaviors might happen in a group, and how do you manage that?
Mm. In a group, we have not had problems like this so far because since we do have the individual preparation, we really try to screen well who can take part in this on behalf of the offenders. So when we see that there is someone who has manipulative behavior or something, usually they are not even sent to the information event by social services because prisons, they usually look through the list as well and they know them. So they really just don't give them access to it. Or when then during the individual interviews, we have the feeling that this might be someone who really is not there for the right reasons, we have every right to say that we're not taking this person into the group. But once we get to the group, we have not had this.
Great. And Marion's wondering which other countries use restorative dialogues?
Oh, many, many, many. I know that in Europe there are a lot of countries who use it. France uses it a lot. Some of you may have seen the movie All Your Faces, which shows as well the groups how they have it in France. In Belgium, they have it for political violence. They have it for sexual and domestic violence and as well for other groups. Germany has it. I know that in Spain, they have groups as well. The Czech Republic, they have approaches. There are many countries, and I know in the US and Canada there are many programs like this, in Australia and New Zealand as well. And I'm sure in Asia there are programs as well. So it's really something, as I said in the beginning, it's not that it's so uncommon, but because each program has its own name. I use now restorative dialogues as a cover term, and I explain why in the beginning of the book. But I think we hear maybe less about it because each program has its own name.
Great. I think that I've covered all the questions. Joy, have I missed anything that you've noticed? Does anybody want to ask anything?
I was just going to ask, what sort of names do these programs tend to go by, just out of interest? How do people explain them in different countries?
Mm-hmm. So I know that in France they call it encounter between victims and offenders. In Germany they call it victims and offenders in dialogue. I don't even know in Belgium. And then, for example, well, one program in Belgium, I don't know. Another is mentioned by name in the book as well. It's called Rétition du lien. So it's like this connection between them. So they have like specific program names as well. I know one is called Building Bridges, but I don't know too much about this. There's the Sycamore Tree project as well. Some of these projects are done the same way we do, others are done differently. So yeah, many different names.
I think one of the great things about the book is, Claudia being able to share her journey with it as well, and how it has evolved, and what practices, what experiences have informed practice amongst her team, which is really a really lovely thing. Another question, have you heard of any experiences in the Asia context? So in Myanmar, for example, it's quite a new concept. Yeah.
I know that there is quite a bit going on in Asia as well, because when I did my master's thesis a couple of years ago, I had some interview partners in Asia, and I think that there is a forum as well, an Asian forum. Carrie, maybe even you know the name of.
There's a Korean Association for Restorative Justice, and then you've got the Asia Pacific Forum of Restorative
Exactly.
Justice.
Yeah. So there's a lot of thing going on, and I think especially if you look for the forum maybe online, you might find out more information. What's happening currently, I don't know, but I know that there are things going on. And the next book in the series, Carrie, is as well from Asia, right? So
From Singapore, yes, and it's about restorative justice, a whole school restorative approach in Singapore. So that's super exciting. Its release date, I think, is in 16 days' time when it comes out. So I'm really, really, really excited. And the Mint House have been amazing in really supporting this series and allowing some space to promote the books that come up in with it. So Justin, the lead of the group, it's a larger group from a team, the Lutheran Community Care Services, the social workers, and we're doing an event in September that will be talking about that book. So do come along if you're interested in that, spread the word. So just quickly, Marion, you wanted to tell a quick funny story?
Yeah, this was it was called a victim offender group. They didn't say exactly. I was actually attending as a victim. It was shortly after I'd left victim support, and my leaving present from victim support was stolen. It was a kind of piece of electronic sort of tape machine thing. And a friend of mine who was working in probation said, would I join? And it was an interesting group. There were four, it was a burglary was the theme, 4 burglars and 3 victims. One of them elderly and very worried about, what had happened, feeling, but as we were talking, one of the victims was saying how vulnerable she felt. And one of the offenders said, "Oh, that's terrible." Said, I would never burgle a house with old people or children, because my daughter was 6 and she was quite frightened. And then somebody else in the group said, "Yeah, but how would you know till you was in there?"
Yeah.
Would have heard a pin drop. Anyway, that's the story.
It is funny, I guess, how, conversations and listening to other people can bring out things that you haven't necessarily considered, or that make you, I always think of Sykes and Matz's techniques of neutralization theory, criminological theory, which talks about how we all see ourselves as inherently good people, right? So then what leads people to do things that are bad? And it's funny, the stories we tell ourselves to neutralize any kind of risk of us perceiving ourselves as.
But it was another burglar.
Yeah, of course.
Pointed that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As you say, the kind of the power of bringing people together.
Thanks, Marion. So, and there was another comment that was left. It wasn't a question, but just about, being able to work in a trauma-informed way collectively as part of a team, and how that can be perceived sometimes by management or people who aren't part of this field as something inherently risky. And people might be quite risk averse to that in terms of it re-traumatizing people, being able to talk about things. And I think that we can all relate to those types of reactions. But one of the attendees who was reflecting on that was saying that they found this talk very helpful, and they're looking forward to looking at the book and information on that to help them move forward on that. So another question is around what logistical challenges you have encountered for victims. So in terms of, time commitments or the dates at which they're going to have to attend or anything like that? Are there kind of challenges related to those logistics, and how do you get around them?
Yeah, so it's not always easy for victims to participate over 8 sessions. But for example, right now we'll start a group in about 2-3 weeks, and 2 of the victims have been burglared only recently. And so they said, you know, I have to make the space and time for it, because I know if I don't do it now, it will have more of an effect on me. So often they really try to see that they can take off work or whatever. We have one group or one prison where we do it in the evenings, which is easier for victims sometimes who are working. But most of the prisons, they have to do it during the afternoon. And we've had victims who in the end were not able to participate because of time constraints. But usually, yes, they try to really go for it. What we always hear when you say 8 sessions in the beginning, people may think it's a lot. And what we always hear in the end was, oh, time was so short. There would be so many other things to share. And as the group grows together and the relationships are so important, it's as well something they say, we will miss this group. So yeah, but it's not always easy. But so far, when people committed to it, they really did commit until the end to this because it was important for them.
Thank you. One more question around how does trauma-informed influence the kind of restorative dialogues inherently? What is it that changes if we're working in a more trauma-informed way?
I think it already changed the preparation of how we do things, how we prepare victims as well, the topics we address with them. We also really ask about where they stand or where they think they are in terms of their recovery, whether they are afraid that there might be triggers coming up, how we can see if they're being triggered, what we can do in these moments. Are there any signs that we can perceive or signs that they can make? And to really know as well, is it someone who would like to be touched, for example? Is it someone who needs to be on their own? And to really go into detail like this, we really address specifically the topic of shame as well, and how it might affect as well their participation. And many other topics that have to do with how we prepare victims. So that's one aspect. The same obviously with offenders, and we're very clear as well that we're not looking at them just as the offenders, but that we really want to get to know them as human beings, and that we know that many of them have been through difficult and traumatic situations as well. So we really check as well, how can we support you on in your own journey? How can we be alongside you in this process? What might you need? And as we really put it into words as well, how we see them and that we are aware of this. And we also address the topic of shame, for example, with them individually, but as well as a group. It helps them as well to open up. And we have so many who say, it's for the first time in my life that I share about what I have been through. And we realize, because they don't just speak about what they have done when they share their story, but they are invited to share their life stories as well, how many were able to make connections between a traumatic event in their lives and how their criminal career, for example, started. And often that's really a turning point in their lives where they suddenly see, now I understand, now I know what I would need to work on, things like this. And the other thing, it changed the way we prepare prison staff, prison governors, because we're very clear. We are coming here with people who have been victims, who may have been traumatized. So we need that staff understands this as well, how to do security checks and this and that and whatever. And sometimes it really takes courage to stand up even to security bosses and say, I'm sorry, but this can't be done like this and this and this. But usually when we explain why and in a respectful way, and that's as well where it comes into trauma-informed means to understand what trauma is. So when in simple terms, I can explain what happens to a traumatized person and why he or she might react this and that way, and what change it can make, for example, if we do it this other way that may not be complicated, maybe different, they understand and they accept it. And honestly, I find it amazing how staff who has been informed, they are so open and welcoming to victims. And one thing I often hear from victims, they say, you know, even a part of my healing process is the way I was treated by the criminal justice system now, especially the ones who may have had contact with the criminal justice system before and it was not positive. But to see how they're welcomed by prison staff, how they really try to make them feel safe and things. So yeah, there are many aspects as well. In terms of the program, we don't have like a strict program anymore. We know what we would like to do, what we would like to address, and still we're flexible. We co-create and we really discuss with the group what they need. And each program is different.
And that comes with experience, right? I mean, even in higher education teaching, you know, I find, I mean, I was a rubbish teacher when I first began because I was so nervous and so worried about things going wrong. And so, you know, you have a script and you stick to it. And the more confident you get in your own practice and relationships and understanding, I guess, of how prison institutions work, the more relaxed you become. And also co-productive, I guess, because you get more secure in what it is that you're doing. So I think a question, and I'll come back to Odette's question in a second, is related to what I found really interesting is your experience of the prison initially and how you engage with the prisons and how that has changed now. And I think that that's really insightful work, especially in England and Wales, where actually accessing prisons might be really quite difficult for restorative justice services. And navigating that space and getting in is really challenging. But I guess it always goes back down to relationships, right? And just as how you might have some victims or perpetrators come to you because they know people who have been through this process before, the same works by word of mouth with institutions. So if one prison has a good relationship with you and things are working in positive ways and they can see transformation happening with prisoners, then it's likely that they might mention this to other governors, etc. So it is kind of a domino effect. So another question is, what are your assessment criteria around knowing that somebody is ready to engage in a process like this? How do you navigate that?
What we realized is that when we ask victims to share their story with them or what they feel comfortable with, this gives us a lot of information. The way the person speaks, the way the person acts during what they're telling, what they're not telling, how they're telling it. So we really try as well to see how they react in these moments. Then we also ask what kind of support they have had so far, if they know of situations that are particularly challenging for them. So it's really through engaging with them. We spend quite a bit of time with victims as well, building relationships, and as well to see how well do they know themselves or what their own triggers are. And I'd say the most like illuminating things for us really is how they share their story. That really helps us.
So just one last question. What models and theories of shame do you use? And have you borrowed from working with other shame programs or completely designed your own?
So we obviously use Brené Brown's materials on shame resilience. We also work with Donald Nathanson's Compass of Shame. And then the rest has lots to do as well with understanding what shame is, how it works in people's lives, and how we can also create that shame-sensitive space with people. So yes, some things are borrowed, some things we have developed on our own.
So just to say, lots more detail in the book, so please do read it. And as Claudia says, you know, the style of this series is about sharing how does this practice actually work? How do we set it up? What are the processes that we use? What case studies do we have? How has that helped us to reflect and then change what it is that we do? Just to mention in closing, there is a feedback form. Please do use it. It's really helpful in MintHouse understanding, you know, what is useful about their events, but also for us in terms of some feedback around what you have found really interesting, any suggestions you might have for programs, authors, books that you might like to read. If you want to have a conversation with me, please do. And linked to the topic of today is the MintHouse's next webinar, which is Margaret Thorsborn and Joe Brummer, who's speaking on the 7th of May on becoming a trauma-informed restorative educator. So there's a lovely link running from this presentation into the next. I just want to thank you so much, all of you, for being very generous with your time coming today. I hope that you found it useful and illuminating and that you've enjoyed Claudia's presentation, which I thought was great. Thank you so much, Claudia. And thank you so much Joy, for having us and for being supportive. And if you don't know the Mint House, they are great. So I definitely recommend following them. All right. And that's it from me. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy the sun. And hopefully I will see you again in September. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks as
you.
well on my behalf.